Hey everyone, today let's talk about Apple's M5 Pro and M5 Max. At first glance, they look like routine upgrades. A few more cores, a bit more bandwidth, and a small bump in performance. That's the usual Apple rhythm. But in reality, this is the biggest architectural shift in Apple Silicon since the M1 launched. Behind this change, you can see not just a turn in Apple's roadmap, but maybe the future shape of high-performance OCs, and even where the whole semiconductor industry is heading. So today, let's go a little deeper. Grab a glass of water and let me walk you through it. In Apple's official write-up, they said the M5 Pro and M5 Max are made by fusing two dies together. That sounds familiar, right? It almost sounds like Apple just brought down the same glue tech from the old M2 Ultra, but actually the two are quite different. Back in the M1 and M2 era, UltraFusion joined two fully complete SoCs together. They were mirror images of each other. Each die had a full CPU, GPU, NPU, and everything else. They were two identical chips combined into one. But the M5 generation looks more like one chip split in two. Apple appears to have taken one SoC apart and distributed its IP blocks, its functional modules, across two dies. Then it stitches them back together with advanced packaging, while keeping bandwidth high and latency low between the two dies. As we all know, Apple has been a firm believer in big monolithic dies ever since M1. AMD and Intel moved to chiplet-style designs much earlier, but Apple never went that way. So why did Apple stick with big monolithic chips? First, cache coherence is easier because all the signals stay on die. And with every module on the same piece of silicon, both latency and power are handled in the cleanest way possible. So why is Apple splitting things up now? The main reason is simple: the GPU keeps getting bigger. And when the GPU gets bigger, one other thing has to grow with it: memory bandwidth. Because GPU performance is throughput driven. If compute goes up but bandwidth does not, the data cannot get in fast enough, and the GPU just sits there doing nothing. On top of that, M5 adds a major upgrade. Each GPU core now includes a neural network accelerator, basically Apple's version of a tensor core. The old M1 Max already had a huge die at 432 square millimeters. By the last generation, the M4 Max likely pushed past 600 square millimeters based on transistor density. At that size, you are getting close to the reticle limit of a lithography machine. Anyone with a lithography machine at home may have known this. Making chips is kind of like photocopying. You put the circuit on a mask, then project it onto the wafer below. After that, the wafer moves, and you copy the next section. But the total area you can expose each time has a hard limit. ASML's most advanced EUV machine today has a maximum field size of 33 by 26 millimeters. If you put two finger joints together, that is about the size. That is roughly the largest chip you can make on Earth. But some people will ask, if 33 by 26 millimeters is over 800 square millimeters, and Apple is only at a bit over 600, then isn't there still a lot of room left? But remember, 858 square millimeters is only the physical limit. There is another limit too, the economic limit. In modern chipmaking, wafer defects are basically random, so the larger the die, the more likely it is to get hit by one. On TSMC S-current 3 nanometer process, defect density is about 0.2 defects per square centimeter. So if you make a small 200 square millimeter chip, the yield is around 67%. Say a full wafer costs $20,000. We can cut 320 dies. If 33% fail, that is 106 scrapped, leaving 214 good dies. That works out to $93 per die. But if the die grows to 400 square millimeters, yield drops to 45%, and cost jumps to $278 per die. And if you go all the way to an 800 square millimeter monster, yield crashes to 20%, and cost shoots up to $1,250 per die. See, that curve grows exponentially. That is why most high-end consumer chips today stay in the 400 to 600 square millimeter range. Of course, there are exceptions. One chip really did reach a wild 814 square millimeters. Whose rich guy move was that? No surprise, it was the H100. So why can the H100 be that huge? First, its SM units are highly repeatable. Each one is basically the same block, like copied and pasted. If a few break, Nvidia will fuse them off and still sell the chip. In theory, H100 has 144 SM, but the shipped SXM version enables 132. and the PCIe version only 114. So unless your luck is terrible and you cannot even get 114 working, the die still ships. And more importantly, every time one of these sells, the leather jacket guy gets $25,000. At that point, a few $100s of wafer cost is basically free. But for Mr. Cook, that math looks very different on a mass market consumer chip. If each die costs $50 more, annual profit drops by hundreds of millions. So on one side, GPU scale keeps exploding. On the other, process and cost are both hitting hard limits. That is why Apple Silicon made a major turn this year, away from monolithic SoCs and toward a multi-die high-speed interconnect design. So the next question is, how exactly did Apple split the chip? The official info is very vague. Apple never gives real details, but we can still try to infer the layout from the public specs. From M5 Pro to Max, GPU core count and memory bandwidth both double together. That is a very clean, linear relationship. That suggests one die is probably CPU heavy. The other is GPU heavy, with the memory controller most likely placed on the GPU side. That would be a pretty sensible split. Compared with the CPU, the GPU needs high bandwidth far more. And since the media engines and ray tracing units also scale with GPU size, they are probably on the GPU side too. That leaves the CPU side handling the traditional logic, including the CPU, NPU, ISP, and iOS like XD and Thunderbolt controllers. This year, the CPU side of M5 Pro and M5 Max looks almost identical. Both go up to 18 CPU cores and a 16-core NPU. So my guess is that the CPU side uses the exact same die design in both chips. The difference is just binning. Perfect dies go to the M5 Max and higher-end M5 Pro, while slightly flawed ones lose 3 CPU cores and become lower-end M5 Pro parts. The GPU side is a different story. M5 Pro and M5 Max probably use 2 different designs, but not from scratch. It is more like a scale-up. You can think of Max as basically a doubled-up Pro. That explains why GPU cores and memory bandwidth rise in lockstep. LPDDR5X runs at 9,600 megatransfers, and one 64-bit channel gives a theoretical 76.8 gigabytes bandwidth. So M5 Pro at 307 gigabytes is probably using 4 channels. Then M5 Max duplicates the GPU side and the memory channels, which lands you at 40 cores, 8 channels, and 614.4 gigabytes. Same idea here. Full dies go to the top M5 Max, while cut-down versions lose 8 GPU cores and 2 memory channels, leaving 460.8 gigabytes. The numbers line up perfect. As for cache, L1 and L2 are probably still tied to their own clusters and distributed across both sides. But where the system cache sits, that part is harder to guess. It could all be on the GPU side, since the GPU is the biggest bandwidth consumer. Or Apple may have split it across both dies. For that, we will need future die shots. So if this theory is right, then we can take it one step further. If Apple Silicon makes another Ultra in the future, it probably will not use the old of simply joining 2 full sockets. A more likely path is that Apple keeps scaling the GPU side, maybe even with an asymmetric setup, like 1 CPU die plus 2 GPU dies. But again, this is still speculation. Without a die shot, we are just making an educated guess. Now let's look at the real-world side. What did M5 Max actually improve over M4 Max? And is it worth buying? I think that mostly depends on what you use the machine for. Let's start with the answer. If you are buying it to run models, then honestly, do not hesitate. M5 Max is a qualitative leap over M4 Max. But if your workflow does not involve AI, and you mostly do developing, video editing, creative work, then you can treat it like a normal generational upgrade. The real dividing line is whether you have heavy AI workloads to run. When we talk about LM performance, there are 2 main metrics. The first is called prefill, weird name. In simple terms, it measures how long the model takes to produce the first token after you send in a prompt. That part is mainly determined by GPU compute. The second metric is tokens per second, which is simply how many tokens the model can produce every second after that first one. That speed is mostly set by memory bandwidth. Using the MLX framework, we deployed a dense QW 3.527B model in BF16 on both M4 Max and M5 Max, which is a fairly heavy load. In the prefill stage, M5 Max improves a lot. We tested with 2K, 4K, and 8K context lengths. and M5 Max delivered about 3.5 to 4 times the pre-fill performance of the last generation. That matches Apple's own claims pretty well. That gain likely comes from the neural accelerators, which has added to M5, which massively boosts large-scale multiply accumulate operations. But in the decode stage, the improvement is much smaller. Tokens per S go up by a bit less than 10%, which lines up with the memory bandwidth increase. From M4 Max to M5 Max, bandwidth rises by roughly 12%, and output tokens are basically linear with that. So the simple way to think about it is M5 Max makes the model think much faster, but not make it talk that much faster. So what does it benefit most long context tasks or jobs with lots of back and forth reasoning, like RAG retrieval or privately deployed agents like OpenClaw? As for buying advice, it really depends on your needs. For general office work, basic writing, and web browsing, just get the M5 tier, then decide whether you need more memory. If you multitask a lot, or keep dozens of browser tabs open, then adding extra memory makes sense. For video editing, creative jobs, or heavier development, look at the Pro tier. If it is a machine you make money with, then go for M5 Pro. If your needs are only moderate, M4 Pro is still very strong today, and used prices are pretty attractive. Now, for this kind of work, you do not need to chase the latest ones. They are better, but it is not a whole different class. Then, consider the Max tier if you need to run high-performance local models. In this case, M4 Max does not look nearly as attractive today, because the gains in M5 series are just too big. So if your main goal is model work, I would skip the whole M4 lineup and just buy the new generation. Before we wrap up, let's zoom out a bit and talk about what is really happening behind this M5 architectural change. Over the past decade, semiconductor progress has mostly centered on process nodes, from 28 nanometers to 14 to 7 to 3, and from FinFET to GAA. The main goal of each generation was always to shrink transistors and pack in more of them. But today, innovation in semiconductors is shifting from advanced process to advanced packaging. Packaging now matters more than just talking about nanometers. It is just harder for people to grasp, because you cannot reduce it to one simple number. And behind that shift is a deeper change in what we now want from computing power. For decades, the CPU was the heart of computing. That is because most traditional workloads were latency-driven. You gave it a task, and you wanted it to answer fast. Those tasks have lots of branching and lots of complex logic. That is exactly what CPUs were built for. High clocks, branch prediction, and out-of-order execution all exist to handle that. The design goal of a CPU was to cut latency and keep the computer responsive. But on modern personal computers, real stutter or lag has mostly disappeared. Today, almost all heavy workloads are throughput-driven, like video encode, game rendering, and model inference built around massive matrix multiplication. We used to judge a computer by how long it took to finish one task. Now we care more about how much data it can process per unit of time. That is the shift from latency to throughput. So here is my hot take. In a few years, people may stop caring about a computer's Geekbench score, just like nobody buys a computer today based on CPU clock speed alone. The CPU will still matter, but its role will shift from the center of compute to system control, task scheduling, and I/O management. The transistor budget in future high-performance SoCs will go to the GPU, the memory controllers, and the memory system itself. PC spec wars will shift toward GPU flops, memory bandwidth, and memory capacity. The CPU will slowly become a supporting actor. Before 2010, our personal information infrastructure was built mostly around Windows and the PC. Browsers and most productivity tools all revolved around the personal computer. But after 2010, when mobile internet took off, the smartphone became the new center. And today, we may be standing at another turning point. In the AI era, if each of us needs a personal AI compute center on standby 24 hours a day, then what will that new infrastructure look like? Maybe you could say that when M1 introduced unified architecture, Apple just got lucky and happened to line up with the language model, boom, 2 years later. But today, with Apple aggressively stacking GPU compute, memory bandwidth, and power efficiency across the M series, this is clearly aimed at a very specific target. They want the Mac to become that new infrastructure. People say Apple has fallen behind in the AI era, And that is true at the foundation model and software layer. But on the hardware side, if today you want a machine that can hold a big enough model, run inference at a decent speed, and avoid insane noise and power bills, the Mac is surprisingly the cheapest option. So to sum up my view, this architectural change in the M5 series shows Apple Silicon moving away from the old monolithic path and toward a multi-die, high-speed interconnect path. In the short term, the driver is an engineering problem, mainly cost and yield. But in the long term, this is really part of a broader paradigm shift in high-performance computing architecture. Let me add one more point. Remember the reticle limit we talked about. ASML's next-generation high-end AUV machine cuts the field size almost in half, down to about 26 by 16.5 millimeters. That means the monolithic die path is basically blocked at the physical level on the next generation of tools. That is why I say the main battleground in semiconductors is moving from advanced process to advanced packaging. Making the chip is only the step one. Now step two is to stitch them together. So for the past few decades, the scarcest thing in semiconductors was leading-edge process capacity. Whoever got access to 5 nanometer or 3 nanometer production was on top. But after 2023, the game changed. The new bottleneck is gradually becoming advanced packaging. Right now, there are really only 3 players in the world that can do advanced packaging. It's TSMC, Intel, and Samsung. And the most mature solutions are mostly in Taiwanese hands. So once we unlocked the foundational technology called AI, major changes started spreading across industry after industry. And semiconductors may just be the first foundation layer where that transformation is showing up. All right, thanks for listening, and I will see you in the next video.